No news reporter.
Good morning to everybody, and thank you for coming back so early. And there's coffee, juice, everything out there if you need anything. This morning could be here. You're going to drive a timeline this morning. We have a few things we want to talk to you about.
That's some pressure.
But wanted to just kind of start a little bit from scratch today. You know, what our foundations are from a staff perspective when we start putting things together. And then talk a little bit about some hopefully a schedule for the year. You know, we got this yesterday, and I use this in some of my PowerPoints. It really is a good visual on the things that we have to do. And this is part of our foundation of the work that we do. So when we look at foundational things and the work we're going to do and how we're going to plan, this is a good document to have. And this is the other document that drives a lot of our work. That you have in your package not only the original, but you have the updates, because we periodically give you updates on where we are with the measures. I do think one of the things that's a challenge for us is measuring some of the things we invest in, because the return is not today. The return is often, several years from now. It's like sending a kid to kindergarten. You don't exactly get the return right then that's as measurable as later on in their life. We had a superintendent one time that used the word longitudinal, and I think some of our measures really are falling in that category. But we do try to measure as we go, and you'll see that in this document. In the schedule that we're going to bring you, we do have a time period where we update the document and then provide some additional information with budget on what we do with these issues. Every year when we, this is confusing because, it's just 2 years since the election. So, and this is new to me because we've always had the 4-year cycle. So it feels like we just went through the rules. And these are your rules. There are the foundation that we use for operating certain aspects of the county. But whether it's the board rules, which are code of ethics, or some of the resolutions you've adopted that we use to guide the work that we do, they're yours to change as you wish. So what you have in your package, and real open to having whatever dialogue you want to have as we approach each document. The first document in your package is your board rules. Those were updated 2 years ago because we went from 5 to 7 members, so there's several things in there outdated. We have had a couple of things brought to our attention that do need a little bit of tweaking. If you look at page 1, section 4A, it reads as if you call, you could just get on the agenda. And I'd like to put that language a little bit to say you be considered for the agenda, because we don't want people to assume that they can just call them down the agenda. We would have quite a wide variety of topics to deal with every day. But these are...
You mean for like just for a regular citizen?
2 words, chain free.
Maybe not about for commissioners to get some review, just for a person.
This is for, if a person wants to come, and we get some calls, say, I just want to be on the agenda, and it's like, well, your topic doesn't, it's not something that we really have local control of. So I just want to add a word to be considered.
So she'll make a request to be considered.
Considered for, yeah. So, and when I go through it, that's one of the things that I would feel better if it were there, so that we're just a little clearer with people who do pull our rules. But just open the floor for your any discussion that you want to have on the board rules. Michael's here and can tell you any details if you've got a question about what the rule really is. And it may be that you just want to take it and think it through. And I just want the floor to be open for y'all to decide that.
Okay, would it be good, just in light of review and in light of the commissioner, just for Michael or you or whoever, just to go 1, 2, 3, 4 and just do a brief, like, okay, here's what we want to do, let's do this. you know, not necessarily get in the weeds unless somebody says,
Yeah.
you know, I want to get in the weeds, or, hey,
Yeah, I'm good with that, if y'all are good with that.
I can try to do that. Let's see, we'll just sort of bounce through from the get-go. I mean, regular meetings, we know we have the first and third Tuesday of the month. Special meetings are called by the chair or any two members of the board, and to have a special meeting, you need 48 hours notice in advance. That to be, as opposed to an emergency meeting, where if it's a declaration of disaster, we have a new ordinance for that to speed up the process. We just need to make sure in that situation that we inform all the board members. And then David gets to go ahead and stamp your signature, and we're good to go. That usually be driven by stuff through Jerry Dehahn's office for weather-related incidents. As we all know, next Monday's, or a couple weeks from now, is December 1st, and that's always the organizational meeting of the board. Organizational meeting is just the swearing in and appointing those officers that need to be appointed. Now, I think Brownie hit on the point regarding the agenda, and we're just talking about individuals that are requesting to be on the board. What we got on the next page, generally what we have in the rules are the county manager is responsible for putting the agenda together, doing normal business. The chairman or any three members of the board, as how it currently reads, can have items added to the agenda. We made it 2 years ago and went to 4 members. The logic being there's 5 members. 2 is probably enough that is obviously deserves serious consideration in the board time and maybe public input. So when it went to 7 members, the logic was let's make it 3 members or the chairman, and obviously always the county manager through regular business. Always it comes up, I mean, how many, what do you need to, excuse me, if there's a public hearing, of course, required by law to have public comment. Lots of times, it might be just a business decision, political decision of a board member that any item of new business or old business deserves public comment. So that's just a decision for the board to have public comment during non-public hearings, legal public hearings. So right now we have new business items. If it's a new business item that is not a public hearing item, then any 2 members of the board can bring it up for public comment. And if we want to leave it like that, we'll leave it like that. Old business currently says if there's 3 members of the board that want public comment, then it can do so. I mean, I don't, in the last few years, I've never heard that 3 members that want old business to be brought up. Vaughn went yesterday over the powers of the presiding officer. That's obviously the rule, motions in or out of order. Determine whether or not a speaker's gone beyond reasonable standards of courtesy in his remarks. Which reminds me, I don't know if you all have been briefed, but we were sued by Lisa Landis. I was trying to remember her name. So that's a lawsuit in federal court, and Kurt is working on that for us. And part of her issue was, and I think all board members and Chairman Gantt knows this, but part of her was that she got thrown out of the meeting by the chairman. Does she have a constitutional right to comment or to speak as long as she wants, or whatever she wants, or however she wants? That's sort of the issue. Also, she's worried about the funding for URTV, but over the main issue she's brought up were the 3 or 4 meetings in which she was speaking. And I just bring this up because it's always important for all board members and new board members to remember that, you know, you sort of volunteered for this, so you asked for it. So you're going to get some real pointed comments sometimes directed at you individually, so sometimes you just have to be tough. Lisa Landis wasn't. She took offense and filed a lawsuit. But yet, in any case, that is the chairman's job. If someone goes beyond the normal courtesy, goes off on a tangent, is not speaking regarding something that's before the board.
What would be, I mean, we've been told we're going to burn in hell. So beyond that, what would be grounds for getting kicked out?
She was attacking staff at that
Yeah,
point.
she was personally attacking staff and the commissioners. Now, it would be my thought that, you know, legally they could say whatever they want about the commissioners, but not, but as a whole. But I don't.
It's been on one time.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was doing the same.
I thought of Chris Price about it.
And sometimes it's tone too, and when you see the deputy start stepping up,
Yeah.
they have a worry at that point.
I think, mine is, I think profanity is one.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
I think if they won't sit down after
Right.
the time's up, if they continue to argue and start, I think sometimes people get up there and they want to get a rise out of us, and they have a right to do that, that's part of public comment. But I think when it goes beyond the time, it becomes, I don't know if it's in our rules now or my little talk before the public comment, but I don't, they can attack us, but I don't want them attacking the
Right.
staff. I think when they say, Wanda Green is a bad person, John Creighton's terrible, you know, I don't think that's public
Right.
comment.
Right.
I don't know, I might be wrong.
No,
Mike.
I-
I think we have a right to say, okay, talk about me, talk about our policies,
Right.
but not talk about Mandy, Kathy, staff.
It basically says that they're not supposed to talk about any individual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's appropriate for the chairman to
But
say,
that-
you can direct your comments to the,
That is.
To the
no,
county,
We
to-
gotta get
to the
a report
commissioners.
from someone to be able to take that. As commissioners, yeah.
As commissioners, yeah, I think it's pretty,
Yeah.
I mean, even some outrageous things, I think we've got to, I've never.
And the one thing I have to say, and I think, and Harvard's there, and you were not at the meeting that Bill Stanley held,
Oh,
and he went after her pretty hard. Where do you live? Give me your address. Why are you speaking?
who, Lisa?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear about that, you know. I would-
well,
That was before she ever spoke.
yeah, that was in her lawsuit.
That's surprising.
I think that what I've seen, what I've seen the chairman do is avoid something escalating. I think what all these things are is you're trying to avoid something that you see as escalating. And if you think it's gonna cross the line, then you gotta kind of calm it down however you do that. And, you know, and keeping the profanity from happening, keeping these, you know, aggressive moves, you know, kind of watching that kind of, you know, we have to do that. I mean, you got the whole room, I mean, you have people that all of a sudden explode, start clapping, and start doing different things, and you just have to kind of,
David, in all your time being chair, how many times have you given someone the boot?
3 or 4.
3 or 4.
I'd say less
That's
than
pretty
10
long.
for sure.
That's a pretty long, you know.
But it's been close a couple times. I just think if people aren't respectful and it's more, they can be disrespectful up to a point, but I think, and I don't know how to articulate it, it's like the curve I was talking about, bell curve. You can be real disrespectful, but I think you hit a point, it's like beyond your right to get here and ridicule people.
Mhm.
And I think staff, commissioners, I think are fair game all the way through. I really have a hard time, no matter what they say, because I think we put ourselves out there.
I think if they said things about our family.
Yeah, I think family would probably cross the line.
Yeah. That has nothing to do with your
No.
working for the people.
And there is a point of view, and I think it's something we all should do, is, I think you said it at the preface, we just got to deal, I mean, we got 3 minutes, and we just, that's what public comment is. We used to have it at the end of the meeting, we used to have it at the beginning. We've done just about every combination since I've been on the board.
only thing I say is like now, we're all taking over again. Just come back and see who wants it at the end, the middle, or the front end. Because last, when we were elected and put on the board, we asked the question to the audience, and the audience is going to make the decision.
Yeah, you got people that say, well, if I do it at the end, I don't influence your decision
That's
that
right.
day. If I do it at the beginning, you don't listen to me. Or I want to do it at the end and the beginning. I mean, there's a lot of ways to look at it. I don't think there's a right or wrong way.
Yeah.
And it's done different ways across the state. I do know that. I think people have different ways. I'd say most.
Yeah,
people
a
do
few
it
years
at the
ago,
beginning.
when, it was 3 or 4 years ago, when all the URTV stuff was happening, and we changed the rules for public comment. We didn't change any rules, strike that for public comment, but I prepared, we talked to Wanda, and we prepared the shortened version of, let's remind the public what the rules are for public comment. So that's when we did that. And we shared that with the state, and I think a lot of jurisdictions now read that before their public comment, whenever it is. And I think it's helped a lot. I mean, just remind everybody, you get 3 minutes, stay on topic,
Yeah.
And
be
I,
polite.
and I think to Ellen's point, you know, is how many times have people actually given the boot? You know, it's only, 3 or 4 times. So what you have to be careful of is that you're not basing everything on the exception. Okay, when you do policy. You know, there are exceptions to everything. But the idea of public comment is for people to have the liberty to be able to come in, to talk, to have their time, and be able to do that. And for the most part, that's done very, very well. And so, we don't want to overlook that fact that they come in, they have 3 minutes, they say what's on their mind, and they go to the house, and they feel good about it, and, that's the purpose of it.
So I think that shows too. David's always done a good job just saying, stay home.
Well, it's like that donut they did yesterday. I think it's, everything goes, instead of here are the limits, everything will go unless it's the other way around. We're open, we want to hear what you have to say, and such. We don't want to hear what you have to say in these areas. And we do it a little bit, but I think I agree, I think there needs to be a little bit of guidance, because I think people just don't know. A lot of people, they've never been, they don't know what,
I think how you say stuff is very informative, and I think it's clear once people get there when they can speak and when not. I do, I think you've done a really good job.
Well, my preparedness, I appreciate you doing that.
Sure.
I had to do it a little bit sometimes.
Well, you got to. I mean, that's the job of the presiding officer, is to sort of keep everything in tow and point out the rules. And I skipped over one item.
Can we go back to one, I'm sorry, in the previous section, item D, on the agenda? So item D basically says that to move something from the consent agenda to the regular agenda, or just to get it off the consent agenda, 2 commissioners need to do that. So, but certainly, like, if anyone has any questions about any item on the consent agenda, like, they should be able to ask them, right? So, but if you're doing that, you're almost kind of, by definition, you're almost kind of like taking it off the consent agenda, or kind of good. Well, I guess there's a couple of questions. I'm sorry, I'm just kind of rambling here. One is like, everyone can ask questions about stuff that's on the consent agenda. It's like, hey, item F, what's that about? What are we spending this money on, or what's going on there? But to actually remove it from the consent agenda, if you wanted to like vote on it separately, we're saying that takes 2 commissioners. Is that kind of the intent of the 1 versus 2? Yeah.
Is it that when you move it, that when you move it to the main agenda, the consent, that it creates public comment? Is that right?
No.
It doesn't? Okay.
That's a third.
That's a separate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, that, you could move it to, if it's on consent, then it's probably something new, unless it's an ordinance coming back for a second reading. But so it's probably new, and if you put under new business, and then you need 2 members to bring it up for public comment.
A lot of times, questions happen in pre-session, and then we'll repeat some of that information as we start through the agenda, just before you vote on it.
Yeah, we don't televise the pre-session, and I think there is some information that we answer there that we should answer again
And I think we're pretty,
with the public. I try to be mindful of that I might miss some. If I do, it doesn't offend me, you say, okay, no, we said we need to get this in the public domain, the record here.
And I think in practice, you've always mentioned it after the beginning.
I try to, I might forget sometimes, I don't know.
Yeah, you did.
The last item, F, at the beginning of any meeting, the board, the chair shall remind all members to avoid conflicts of interest or the appearance of conflict. And there was some discussion on that yesterday. That, for county governments, that's not required by law, is a good idea. I mean, it's just sort of to put us on the level field of what the public perceives it is required. When Vaughn was pointing out yesterday, the state and colleges have a separate rule, and they have very detailed reporting requirements, and that does not come to this board here. Now, when we were doing 2 things yesterday. I checked on the statute regarding what's required to be in our code of ethics. So we have the sections, just generally, there's 5 things that need to be in the code of ethics, and I could bring that up here, but it's in our current code. So what's required to be read is, at the beginning of the meeting, I spoke with Wanda yesterday, we could change what the chair reads at the beginning of the meeting to point out something like this, and I'll just try to wing it, but you have the duty I mean, has anybody seen the agenda that has any conflict or appearance of conflict? Do you need to report anything? You say no. So then the chair could say essentially, well, that being the case, by law, everyone has a duty to vote on every item, something like that. And I could work on that if you want to do that. We wouldn't have to change our policy at all. It'd just be something that we could circulate or show to the chair if the chair would want to change it.
I like that, I think that'd be good.
That just
Yeah.
might make it more helpful playing
It's
other.
an educational thing for citizens
Yeah, I
too.
think so.
And I'm not even sure, I might not go another step, and I'll just run it to the board to decide this, but I'd say maybe do a draft and even more about conflicts do not occur unless, I mean, maybe define it a little bit more.
And that's what I pulled up here. Wait, what? Public officers or employees benefiting from public contracts exceptions. Now, what part of the section down is here, public officers or employees derive a direct benefits. We're talking about a direct substantial benefit is the way the case law reads. So that only happens by law. And this is in the criminal code section, chapter 14, so it'd be a misdemeanor if you violated it. If one, the commissioner or spouse has more than a 10% ownership interest in an entity that is party to a contract, derives any income or commission directly from the contract, or acquires a property under the contract. So that's public contracting, but that's how it rolls into the conflict of interest. So it's in a big county like this, it's pretty difficult. And Brownie, when you started on the board, you said, no, our company's not going to do that. That just obviously avoids the issue altogether. Small counties have exceptions because they're small and there's only so many businesses. So it's a pretty high threshold to have a conflict of interest. The only real example I think of, when the county did zoning, everybody wanted to make an issue that David Young had a mobile home park. If he did this, he was going to be able to make more money. That was hogwash, but maybe he'd make one more dime. But the only way that there's going to be really a direct benefit is like if Joe owns the corner of Smoke Park Highway and a road, and the zoning is for that property. Obviously, if it gets zoned commercial, it's going to help him a lot, so he couldn't vote on that. So that's obvious, and it's just not really going to happen that there's going to be a conflict amongst this board that I've ever seen.
Do we have to have legally, the language about, I mean, there's kind of a legal question, and then just is also, is a good idea, has something or not. The language about the appearance of conflicts, because that's, in a way, it's like, in a way, that's kind of what creates the confusion, right? Because there may be this public perception, like, well, to me, it seems that so-and-so having some, affiliation with this group that's got some business here, even if it doesn't pass that threshold. So do we have to use the term the appearance of conflict? Because that is kind of more subjective, right? Than this kind of like what we're really bound by is, does it pass this, these kind of criteria? And unless it does pass that criteria, we're required to vote. And then we're also saying here, does anybody here have anything that would be an appearance
I
of
think we have to
conflict?
get
Which
rid
kind of
of
just almost sounds like two different things.
What you
Yeah.
said yesterday was, you or your household benefits, and I think we define conflict when with the new statement. So that's really clear. Unless these two things are happening, one of these two things, you have to vote.
I agree. For the record, I have never received money from Mountain Bismarck. Never, ever, ever, never. So I like the no appearance.
Well, in fairness, I don't know if it says appearance, I think that's on bracket from the law. That's our standard, is appearance of conflict.
That's in our code of ethics for lawyers.
It's lawyers, so,
But I'm not sure that it's not in,
but let's work on it.
I made a note, I mean, I'll check and see this in the
Let's work on it. Is that good with y'all to kind of define a little bit more? I mean, we don't have to, we can't vote today.
I think that's real clear.
Why don't we direct them to, y'all get together, maybe y'all get a little bit more talk.
If it's possible to not have to use that term appearances, because I do feel like, actually, I don't think it's black and white. I think there's just like, a lot of different people will see these things really differently, but what we need to go by is how the state is kind of like set the bar, and just to the extent we kind of point to that and say, this is the test, and it's not our decision to make, that's the test, and as long as we don't pass that threshold, what's clear, we're required to vote this stuff, so.
So we will draft a statement and Michael will, and we'll
Try to do it immediately.
tweak it from our side and
At
get
the
it to you.
second, for the beginning. Cool.
And we may end up then changing this F so that we
Is
clarify.
that going to get everybody from, we're not giving out vote, but just recommend to do that and come back to it again?
And that's not something that would require a change to the resolution or policy, not if we're just doing it there and what David reads at the beginning of the meetings.
All you're doing is trying to provide more information for item number F to make it clearer to the public on what a conflict is.
Except for the fact that people are going to believe how it's conflicted no matter what, right? So, I mean, it doesn't matter what we say in certain circumstances, but, you know, we may as well try to make it more
But
clear.
it's in the record.
Right.
Well, that's right, and it's in the record, and silence and no agreement, so, you know, every meeting we say this, and then if somebody later, 6 months down the road says, oh, Holly's in conflict, no. You know what I mean?
It's easy to answer, but it's just a
Yeah.
pain.
Right.
Action by the board. So we proceed by motion. All motions require a second. So they would die for lack of a second. And that's Vaughn's point. I've heard that there's some jurisdictions, not many yet, that feel that you really, if you only have 5 or 7 members, it's a pretty large percentage. If any one member makes a motion, do you want to have a discussion about any one motion or not? So that was her point. This board and most boards still have motions require a second. Robert's rules have them out, so I don't know if that's something you discuss or not, but Vaughn did make that point. A motion is not in order if there's already a motion out on the floor. Sometimes I know members get a little ahead of themselves, and that's part of David's job to start. I know David goes down and say, we already have a motion, so we gotta wait on that one. So every motion has to wait to turn and see if it's gonna have a second, or see if it's gonna be voted upon before there can be another substantive motion. And the chair can rule on motion, say that it's out of order if Holly's made a motion, and then Joe makes a motion, then the chair's job to say, Joe, your motion's out of order for now, so we can get to it.
Is amendments under number 8 or number 9? Like, once you do the motion, as far as how to do amendment,
To a motion.
what friendly amendments are, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, well, that's a different animal. If Holly makes a motion and you want to make a motion, I mean, you can offer to amend Holly's motion. You offer a friendly amendment.
Before
And that
original motion is.
is voted on.
Yeah, that, you do that during this, okay, motion, second, any discussion, that's, I'd like to make a motion to amend that. Friendly or friendly, I guess, at that point, and then you
Yeah.
vote on the motion, the
Then
amendment first.
it'd be Holly say, yeah, that's fine with me. Go to that.
But if she says, no, it's not fine with me.
Then you
it's
got to vote
unfriendly.
on Holly's motion.
Vote on the original motion or the amendment? I always
The
thought.
original.
Oh, okay.
If she said no, because no, she
Yeah.
didn't make the table.
Okay, well, I think I've done it both
Well,
ways.
let's talk about that. So if someone has a motion on the table, someone else wants to amend it, it's not a friendly amendment. But if someone else, if there's a second to the
Unfriendly.
to the amendment, then that does get voted on, doesn't it?
Well, we still haven't dealt with the first motion in that scenario. So David would have to sort of rein it all in and say, well, wait, this is Holly's motion. I move we adjourn.
The motion to amend had a second, you had to.
Holly does not have a
No,
second.
we have to see, well, you have to allow the opportunity for Holly's motion to be seconded. Because if you jump in and you try to make your own motion and someone else does it as an amendment,
Okay, right, but like, so let's say Holly makes a motion, I second it. So there's a motion on the table, but then Ellen wants to amend it. So she makes a motion to amend, but we're not supportive of it, so we say, no, we're not, you know. But then Joe says, well, I second Ellen's motion to amend.
Unfriendly amendment.
Then that new
that's out of order.
amendment is
That's out of order.
You're out of order.
Yeah, that's where the chair has to keep it straight. So we have to deal, see, a motion is out of order if there's already a motion on the floor.
Okay, but I think to Brian's point, okay, so let's say that the first and second, that the friendly amendment does not.
It's not friendly.
How would
The
you,
friendly
how would,
amendment's not friendly.
well, we do have in here, number 10 says, you know, a procedural motion to amend.
Well, yeah.
Only if Holly says yes.
But yeah, that's.
There can only be friendly
So-
amendments. I mean, that doesn't make.
Well, I mean,
How do you do a friendly amendment?
let me try this. I mean, Holly moves to adjourn, you second. Ellen says, no, I want to change this. I move we adjourn in 15 minutes, and Joe seconds. Well, the motion on the table is to adjourn.
Because that's just kind of a yes/no thing, like, are we gonna adjourn? or not?
Well, it can
There
be-
can be other things where it's kind of more,
It can be awful
you know,
important, and still be yes or no.
So can we not, okay, so the first amendment, the attempt to the friendly amendment, or whatever you want to call it, doesn't fly, okay? Okay, so you got to vote on the first one.
Right.
Okay, so then you vote on the first one, and I think that, to Brown's point, then I can go, can I not bring that amendment, bring it up as a separate motion,
Yes.
not as an amendment, I bring it up after that as a separate, second thing. You second it, and then we gotta vote on that again. So I can totally
but if the first
change.
motion that's already passed, like, in a way, the issue's maybe
Okay,
over.
I
So-
make a motion, mandatory recycling. Brownie seconds it. David says a friendly amendment, not in Lester. I say no. He can't bring that up later and say, oh, he could.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
could,
yeah. That's it.
Yeah, he
So
could,
we
he
vote-
would make a motion to,
Vote to amend it.
Lester would be exempt from mandatory recycling.
We could make that as a total separate motion,
Yes.
since it failed as an amendment. Fine.
But you don't even think of it that way. Just think of it as a new motion.
Just a,
Because there was never. an amendment.
But what
They
if,
didn't allow
but
it.
to Brownie's point, if we took the vote and it passed, then would we just like immediately do something to, is that what we have?
Yeah, I think efficiency-wise, I've done it the other way. Seems like when there is an amendment, I have said, let's vote on that amendment, because then if it's voted up or down, that may affect how you vote on the overall pending motion. So I will do it different if that's the word.
Well, I think I've seen you read the tea leaves and know that, you see everybody nodding about the amendment to exclude lesbian or open use from Ellen's motion. So I guess unless in that case, unless Holly or Brownie objects, I think everybody's going to see what's going to happen in the second vote.
I guess that's where the rub would be, is like if somebody, if the maker of the motion said, no, not okay, but, so, it's just, I mean, it doesn't have to lie.
No, but I think I've done it wrong. I think I've done it differently. So would I have discretion to do it the other way, or mine?
Not by the rule. that's
Okay,
what
so
it
by
moves to
our
suspend.
rules, I need to do, so, but I think I do need to explain, okay, what you're doing then, because you may be for the adjournment, but 15 minutes later, and you might vote the wrong way because you're thinking you're not going to get another crack at it.
I do think at that point, it's important to repeat the motion that you're getting ready to vote on.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah, okay.
Well, and I think too, we have to be clear, because a couple of times we had one motion on the table and then something else came up and we kind of voted on that motion before the first motion.
Yes.
I mean, it can happen.
Yeah, and then that's when the chair's job is to say, wait, do we have a second for that original motion?
But, Brownie, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. You're trying to make sure that, I think, that the attempt to amend is heard. Or that you actually had the opportunity to do something even though it got shut down, is that right?
Well, yeah, and again, I'm not, I mean, these specific examples we have here may not be as applicable, but sometimes you have like a, a policy where the intent of the amendment is to just modify the outcome. You're not just gonna say, well, there's a motion on the table, I'm 100% against this, I'm just why I would just vote against it if you felt that way, but you're like, yeah, I like the direction this is going, but I'm gonna, well, it may be, enhanced in a way that the original motion maker might find positive or negative, but you're seeking to modify a motion. And it seems like we should have a way of doing that, whether the original motion maker is always
Likes it or not.
enthusiastic about the intent or not. But I mean, shouldn't we have a way to do that?
Not according to Robert.
But I think there's two ways. I mean,
Robert didn't think so.
Well, in our procedural motions right now, it has a process to amend, and it doesn't just say that it's only for friendly amendments, so.
No, it's not.
So that is discretion call?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess there's two ways to do that. First, you can say, well, before we vote, I'd like to amend it to say, you know, this doesn't apply in open use, and the original motion says, no, I'm not for that. So you vote on the first motion, then as soon as that, let's say, passes, then Browning says, well, I make a motion that it applies everywhere except in open use. Second vote, everyone says, okay, or not. Or someone can hop in and say, I want to prevent consideration of Browning's vote for 100 days. You know, who knows what. But
I think it's important not to use discretion and to follow a set of rules, because some of these things can be pretty touchy. You know, so I think we ought to tie it down to the rules.
Well, I think if you don't do it, in my opinion, if you don't vote on the amendment, then you're making it very hard for a minority view to be heard.
But they have the second option to come back and.
But then they want to vote against
and it's always your
the
job.
first motion to make a point.
Well, it's always the chairman's job to make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak before the vote.
Oh, yeah, I'll do that.
But
I'm just worried the procedure here. I mean, this is a good question. I've never thought, I mean, I've just always done it, I think I've done it the other way, consistently.
But then, to your point, I don't see how it prevents somebody from being heard if they have the option of, once we're done voting, to, and we've had that.
Yeah, once the motion's on the table with the second, there's lots of opportunity for discussion.
And we have had, after we've passed something, have someone else make a motion and either ties or doesn't tie, but they feel like they've been heard, I think.
I think, you know, the only time to get into challenges on that, if you feel like there's just not been enough discussion about it. You know, it's just, this is just going too fast. You know, and I can't think of a real example, but it's just going too fast. You know, there's got to be a way to make it, there's got to be a way to change it, there's got to be a way to make it, you know, fit better. You know, and you may feel real strongly about that. You may feel like you might be able to, that your point is valid enough to where if you have more than, you know, 2 or 3 minutes, you know, you're able to do that. So, you know, but I think there's ways of making it go, of doing that.
Can't come up with a topic, but there have been times that once the conversation starts, well, I withdraw my amendment or my motion for amendment.
So,
I'm sorry, just as an aside, just before I forget, just to remind you, while you are all thinking about motions and what you're gonna say and how you're gonna vote, and your attorney's probably flipping through his book to find out what he's supposed to say, you have a clerk sitting here who's only listening. If you ever get too deep in the weeds and can't remember who did what and who said what, ask her.
Amen to that. That's my first note. Ask the clerk.
Because I'm not thinking about anything but what you're saying and who's
Good
made
point.
what motion and who's done what.
You're not getting ahead of nobody. You're just,
I'm just tracking.
So in summary, a motion, unfriendly amendment is rejected, the original motion needs to be voted on, but someone can make an amendment to that right after we vote on the original motion, if they
Right.
choose to. Friendly or unfriendly. So it's just a matter of, you gotta give the person that did the first initial motion the courtesy of a vote before you do an unfriendly amendment.
and you can have as much discussion as you want to regarding that, right?
Right. As long as everybody's on the same page, I mean, I can see either way, you know, just want to make sure everybody gets their day, their say, and gets to vote on it right. I never want y'all to vote on something that's kind of like, we get real convoluted, it's like, is this,
Well, that's
is this in favor of this way or is this over this way? And I don't, because I know there have been a couple of times, I wasn't sure either, I kind of,
Well, and there
sort
are,
this out again.
there are times, just, maybe it's just me sometimes, because when you're getting into this discussion, sometimes you want to go, okay, remind me again, read exactly what we're voting on, because you've got to go, okay, am I yay or nay on that?
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes it's confusing to where you know you're voting for it, but then you're like, well, am I for this or not for it? And you got to have it repeated again so you hear it. It can get a little confusing.
Kathy makes a great point, though. She can read it back anytime.
That's exactly, she can read it.
And I think I could again say, okay, and if you, that unfriendly amendment can be considered, but we've got to do this first.
And I think you've always done a good job to try to read back complex motion.
Try to.
Is that what you said?
I use Kathy too now.
Oh, no.
I'm just having a laugh.
Yeah, you've
I
done
think
really
just-
well at that.
I think the thing about,
always have.
because I just feel like I feel like there's a disconnect between what we're saying in writing and, I mean, our procedural motions right is, in addition to substantive proposals, the following procedural motions and no others shall be in order. Unless otherwise noted, each motion is debatable, may be amended, and requires a majority vote for adoption. And then down here, it has this option to amend. So I feel like we either need to clarify to make it, we're saying that only friendly amendments are, like, the original motion maker has the ability to veto any amendments that they consider unfriendly. We should say that. But writing that down, because to me it feels unclear to me.
I think an amendment, the way I'm reading it, an amendment is an amendment. There's no difference between a friendly amendment or an
I agree.
unfriendly amendment. If you and I want to try to amend, Miranda and Helen's motion, then friendly or unfriendly, we can do that. It might not fly, but we can do
But
that.
you would get a vote on it.
I would
get a vote on
entitled
the
to a
amendment.
vote on that amendment.
Only after, it did, under our articles, only after the person that rejected the unfriendly amendment.
If you get
motion
a
is
second.
held.
Which I think that's fine. I think that's in the rules, Brownie. I mean, that you vote on the first one, right? I mean,
And then you vote on the amendment after the first motion has
Can I-
already been voted on?
Can I
think it's
read,
clear to do it the other way.
Long as you got a second on. Oh, you're sure?
I would say vote on the amendment, and if the amendment doesn't work, then you can decide, do I still want to vote on the original motion?
I think the way to look at that is that a motion is not in order if there's a substantive motion on the table,
Right.
ready to be heard. So after the vote on the first one, you shouldn't even say that we have another motion waiting. You should wait and say, do we have anything further to discuss? Because I think it'd be up to Joe in that example to make his motion again, because it's not in order. And that's
Yeah,
going to be
maybe
tricky.
it,
But
but
if,
It might.
it may just not be.
Say Holly's, comes up and it passes 4 to 3, whatever. Well, even amendment, we're not going to get back to 4 to 3. So it's pretty
Yeah,
much.
that-
Unless you change it, unless you.
I've seen it
really
change.
don't say
I've seen
that.
it, I've seen it change.
Then-
You've seen it, have you seen it from Kathy? Y'all, I've seen it change in a matter of minutes.
Because I would assume the second, that the amendment ends up taking, hopefully, a new life on its own in order to be able to, maybe there's more discussion, I don't know.
can I read this really quickly? It's in for dummies. It says, "The motion to amend is perhaps the single most useful, the subsidiary motion allowed by Robert's rules. You use this motion when you want to change the wording of the motion under consideration. You can use it to make a good idea better or a bad idea more palatable. Amendments are really at the heart of the process of perfecting motions before a final vote. And the importance of understanding the basis of amending can't be overstated." So that kind of goes with how we've been doing it, doesn't it?
Well, again, that would work if the vendor says okay. So it's like, you know, that's
Right.
all good. It's just
Right.
in the part, it's just in the moment which the motion says, that we lose the opportunity to make the motion better, according to the
Where-
Yeah.
Now, where does it say that the person that's making the motion and the person that has the second, that's doing the second, on the original amendment, where does it say that they have the power? Since it
Robert.
takes a- Robert
You
says.
don't want me to read anymore, do you?
I mean, that's why we have a
Robert.
much shorter version of the whole Robert's rules, because we never get anything done.
Yeah.
That was just for a point of view.
But it is.
I do not want you to read them.
I closed it.
Thank you.
So I hear you'd like to have some clarification, but I'm not sure I heard which way you'd like it to go.
In the end, does it matter? I mean, we have the same result.
Where are you at, Brownie? I mean, you started this and, what's your?
Well, however we do it, I just want it to be clear and consistent. So if we decide, you make an amendment, then you vote on the first motion first, and then you can try to amend it later, or the other way. I think we should just make a decision on that. I have always sort of understood it to be that if someone wants to make an amendment, a motion to amend, they can, unless it is friendly, in which case the original person who made the motion is like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. It's sort of like, it gets incorporated by, kind of automatically, the person who made the original motion agrees to just incorporate it into the motion, but if the person who made the original motion is not into the idea, then you can still make a motion to amend, but there has to be a second, as there would be for any motion. There has to be a second, and then you would vote on the amendment. And then, if that passes, then that becomes the motion on the floor. Is the motion with that amendment, and then that's going to be voted on, unless it gets amended again. That's just how I've always kind of understood the process, but I think it can work either way, and I just want us to be clear on which process, so we don't arbitrarily do it one way sometimes and one way another time, or that becomes unclear when somebody brings up a motion, what do we have a handle
But
on?
one thing in this that I think can happen too, maybe I'm wrong, is, okay, she makes, then you get a second, then Joe wants to amend it, and then she says no, but the person that seconded the motion liked his amendment, and they can pull their second. Can't they?
Yes. You can
And
withdraw the
that
second.
way it puts it back on the table.
Totally.
Well, in that situation, Holly's motion may die for a lack of a second.
Unless someone else seconded it.
That's different.
Right.
That's different.
Yes. I'm like Randy, I like that better. I think you amend it, and then you up or down, and then you can decide whether you want to vote for the amendment. You may make the motion, a bad amendment's put in there, and you say, well, I'm not for that anymore. So I'm going to vote against it, because that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, I've seen people vote against their own original motion
Yeah.
because it got amended in a way that, well, I don't like this idea.
I think I've done it.
I have too, so, but that's, that's okay. I mean, that's
But
okay.
theoretically, the amendment, well, you know, whether the amendment passes or not.
I mean, you kind of decide the debatable part up front, and then whatever's left is what you can, then you kind of know yes or no. I don't like that dog anymore, I like the dog, but yes, no.
What was the fun for beating the horse?
Yeah,
That's,
and it's not come up a lot, but when
Well,
it does,
yeah,
I'd
I
say
was
it's
gonna tell
pretty.
Miranda, it's like, in most meetings, it just doesn't matter, but when it does matter, it really matters, you know, so,
It's-
you know, it's weird, but you can't kind of predict it necessarily.
So I don't know if we've given staff instruction, but if y'all just want to kind of,
Maybe you can help me just a little bit. If Holly makes the motion and it gets a second, and then there's a friendly motion or amendment offered, and she incorporates that into her motion, there's still just one, she's restated her motion, there's only one
right,
motion on
one
the
vote,
table.
yeah.
right.
And you know what I'm thinking about it? I don't know that you've ever, I don't know that, in just 2 years, I don't know that we've ever, when you've said, are you okay with that friendly amendment, anybody said no. So maybe that's why this hasn't been an issue.
But
Right.
It has in
usually
the past.
we have done it where it's like we act on the amendment and then come back to the original.
Isn't that what
That's
I
why
do
we've done
normally?
it.
I think I normally act on the amendment first.
Yeah, I think that's.
And traditionally, but if I'm wrong, I'll do it, and, you know, it's the board sets the rules, and I'll follow and enforce the rules.
But like Holly said, it only is an issue if the original person made the motion, and then, you know, you gotta figure out what to do.
So what do we want to tell the staff? We want to revise this, we want to just agree that we're going to do the amendment until the amendment's done, the motion, original motion until it's done.
Yeah.
And then
Well-
after that, someone can do a unfriendly,
I think I don't think any change is necessary, just all goes down to chair number one, rule motions in or out of order, including rights to be heard, et cetera.
okay, what's the preference of the board? I mean, we can't vote on it, but I guess this is more for informational for me, because I think I have done the amendments first. If it's unfriendly, not that it's happened with this group, but I think it has happened before. It seems like I've always done the amendment. Because I think that's where the emotion is. Someone disagrees, and that's where the debate's going to be. Let's just get that out done first, and then you can see if you can stomach what's left, if you did the unfriendly amendment.
I think there's some efficiency to dealing with the topic in one setting. So if there's an amendment made, it's efficient to deal with the amendment and get back. And it may change how, if the amendment passes, it may change how the original person who made the motion
Yeah, efficiency is why I do it that way.
And even if it appears backwards, I've never heard the person who made the original motion jump up and down. So maybe it does work out.
That works.
I mean, I'm okay with the direction of his discussion, which is allows you to be able to go over the amendment, allows you to be able to, have that discussion, because it could improve the first one. Could, and so if you have to go, well, you can do that, let's go ahead and hear the first one, and then we'll talk about the amendment, then you're basically shutting that conversation down.
Right. So, but let's be clear, like, if you make a motion and you don't like an amendment, you should just be really clear about, like, no, I'm not supportive of this amendment, so that everyone knows that, and then there is a requirement to get a second, so if the other people who are there are like, oh, I kind of like the direction of this first one, and now Chris has made that motion to do this, that's,
Yeah.
you're effectively trying to, whatever, so that amendment does have to survive a vote on its own, to move ahead. You can't just amend something on your own, because you want to, it's got to have majority support unless it's friendly.
And I will try to restate I will try to make sure, and any time it's ever unclear, ask me, and if I don't know, ask Kathy or.
So we're not changing
No,
anything.
it's not.
We're
It's
not
more,
clear
it's more how we do it.
I think that's, anyway, thank you. That's,
But
I
it's
didn't.
great to have a conversation, I think, so that
Yeah,
it's
that's
clear.
all, yeah.
Better now than
How do you do that?
What you can't do is put a totally different motion on, and
No.
we did that once upon a time. It's like, oh, just have an air.
Next time.
And under the procedural motions at the end there, it does, under number 18, have the duty to vote, and we've been over that, so it's in there, so David, do we have copies of the rules, Andy, during the meeting?
Yeah.
I usually have.
You usually have, because if in doubt, you could always pull out number 18 and read it. Adoption of ordinances, just so everybody's clear. At a meeting in which is first introduced, it only passes if it's a unanimous vote, except for the budget ordinance or any bond order or any other ordinance which requires a public hearing. So if we're having a zoning issue which requires a public hearing, you obviously deal with that the first day, whether the vote's 6-1, 7-0, or 5-3, or 4-3. The budget process is a different animal, and Wanda will go over that in the spring. We talked about public comment period, and the thing that everybody gets hung up on or forgets is that it takes 8 people to give up all their time in order to give one person 10 minutes. Closed sessions, there's only so many. We usually just use them for acquisition of property or economic development. Sometimes attorney-client privilege, and once in a blue moon on personnel matters. But there's a couple other times when that's appropriate, and really can only talk about the items for which you said we're going into closed session. You can't start, you can talk about the baseball game if you want to, but you can't just start talking about flow control or chain free if you're in there to talk about the Petrello case. By the way, we won the Petrello case, finally.
Yay.
Third time was a charm with the Court of Appeals. Do what? I can tell you about it sometime. It's an 8-year case, bounced 3 times to the Court of Appeals. She didn't get the air quality job, and she never applied for the permanent air quality job. And she said we didn't. Yeah,
It's a long trip, to say the least.
yeah.
I always forget acquisition of property too, as being something you can go in there from, so we don't have a lot.
Well, the trick that's, I suggest we try to avoid it. Because if it's part of an economic development, you need to talk about it. Acquisition is part of the economic development. Otherwise, you might be compelled to say, what are you talking about? How much you paying for it? And somebody will slide in on you. Broadcasting in meetings, Jerry's free to do that. And quorum of the board, we need 4. That just
Hey,
reminds me.
Mike, I got one question on closed sessions, I'm sorry.
Mhm.
So you go to closed sessions to talk about stuff, obviously, that's proprietary, confidential. Do we, as board members, have a legal duty to keep the items that are discussed in closed session private until such point that they are made public through our public process? I mean, obviously, that's the whole idea. I just wanted to, I've actually never been clear on this. I mean, I certainly don't go blabbing, but is it actually, not just, obviously not a good idea, is it actually a legal requirement on board members as well.
That's-
Keep that information.
That's always more philosophical question than it is a legal.
Mhm.
If it's economic development, if they're coming in there under confidentiality and say, I mean, I think it'd be my job or John's job to say this is economic development and they don't want this out yet, so it's not a legal requirement they keep it under the hat, but you could really screw up their efforts to get their 1NC or their JJ from the state, because they are really tough about keeping all that stuff under wraps until the governor gets to come in and say, hey, look what I did.
And often we've signed non-disclosure agreements on those, so
We
that
do
does
have
kind
legal.
of, that does have a little more legal
Yeah.
overtime.
Personnel matters you
Yeah.
have to keep under your hat. I mean, that's in the statute, that is a crime if you go out and say what this person might have been disciplined for. Everybody's date of original hire, last position, classification change, demotion, promotion, their salary, that's always public record. You can always get it in personnel file, stay forever by the retention schedules. But if you're talking about why you're firing somebody, whether or not they're doing a good job or bad job, you gotta keep that under your hat. You can't disclose that.
So,
If we reduce it to writing, it is available, that document is available to the public, but they have to request it. But it's that's the last document that's available. They changed that a couple, 3 years ago, there's
Yeah.
like 23 things instead of
Yeah.
8 now that are available.
so if we're in closed session and we're talking about the county attorney, and people after that closed session go out and discuss what was discussed, bad, right?
I would say yes. Yes, because you're talking about, I mean, that's, I think another example is, what are we going to do if you're talking about procedural requirements for personnel policy? Well, that's not a good example, because you can't do that in closed session, you have to do that in open session. But really, personnel matters, and I just don't have an example where there's been a violation, but, okay, if Kathy had a whole bunch of illness lately, and she's been sick, and she can't come in and do her job, then people are starting to wonder, why isn't she doing her job properly? Well, I think it'd be appropriate to go in and discuss in a personnel setting what the deal is, and if you say, you find out what kind of problems she has with her family or herself, that, you just cannot disclose that. That's HIPAA as much as it is personnel. And either way, that's a federal or state crime. So you gotta keep that kind of stuff quiet. I mean, you're the boss, so you're entitled to know. Now, that's different.
So if somebody broke that rule, and let's just play out the worst case scenario, does the county get sued, or is it the individual or both?
If I were that employee, I'd sue the individual and the county.
But you're just gonna try to see what'll stick, so you're gonna
They would
sue,
both
you're gonna
stick,
sue
that's
both,
fair.
whatever.
You
else.
Just trying to get as much money as you
You
can.
ain't gonna sue all that.
Well, they would both stick in that situation, because the person came out of closed session, started saying what her health condition was. And, oh, by the way, here's Kathy's social security number. I mean, that's just vile stuff, so.
I mean, if I go out on an economic development center, start blabbing and it's blowing the deal, don't I put myself in a silly situation to where that company, if they wanted to sue the pants off me, they could?
No, they could loop back around to
Us being in
us,
those
because we
situations.
sign non-disclosures a lot of time up front.
I mean,
It is.
There's a reason why they call it closed session.
The other part, I said philosophical as much as legal, is because, to Brownie's point, a lot of times you're talking in closed session because you want to be open and frank and honest with each other. So if the next thing you do, you walk out and then Joe's telling everybody what we did in there today, what we're going to accomplish as a result of that, you just lose all trust in that commitment.
That's right.
Yeah,
So
and
that-
it's happened before. And I remember some discussions with other commissioners
Georgia has.
that, we will never let them in the loop again.
And that's really all we
Does
got.
that answer your question, Ryan?
Yep, sure does. This is really helpful. Reminders.
So we're just working on that one thing regarding the ethics statement.
That's what
That, and I only thought on the original thing for public state,
Mm-hmm.
long, taking away a lot of stuff. It basically does say in that particular part that, you don't go after any individual, commissioner. So, I
what David read at the beginning? Yeah. I mean, this is nothing new, it's just a short version of what's written here under section 8 or 13, right?
It's just, I'd just like to see it simple, because I think it goes back to the same thing. Our staff, they're all limits, we are our own limits, because we are voting. Like, somebody wants to say something long as it's nice, you're not cussing us. That's, I'm gonna go out and say.
Okay, so we heard bringing back a statement that you, that you made. Anything else you want us to look at for the rules?
I wonder if, to bring back the fun conversation we had a month ago, is it appropriate to talk about, to write down the polling process in our rules? Would that be helpful? Because, I mean, I sincerely do not know that that was the way to do it. So I'm wondering, obviously I got it now. I mean, I'm so good. But for the future, so it doesn't, happen again for people, that people just assume something is known. But, I mean, it seems like this is where it would be, right?
The one thing that I heard yesterday, on that line was, I'm not sure if we, says any communications of 7 of us, electronic or whatever, consists of a meeting.
But
If-
But on the polling, that's what we need to clarify. If the clerk is doing the polling, she's talking to the 7 of you individually. The 7 of you are not talking to one another.
And
I think we
the
should.
reasons that, the reasons that you called, is that going too much into what
Well, it's not, I mean, because, and I was, out of town on, something was a great meeting. But I guess, one of the distinctions, right, is that, because even if Kathy's doing it or someone else is doing it, if it's like a public policy decision, you still can't do it, right? That has to be made in a public meeting and voted on and everything. But I guess like on the hours of operation thing, I guess when that topic came up to me, I didn't see it as like we're making a public policy decision that has to be made in public. I just kind of saw it as more of an operational kind of thing, and and they asked for our input, but
Yeah.
I kind of, but if it was actually a public policy concern, it doesn't matter how you do it, it's always going to be wrong to do it outside of an actual
Right.
meeting, right?
That's
If it's more of an
right.
operational thing, and you just kind of saw our input, that's then going through Kathy or whatever, that seems fun,
But that whole conversation you just had, which is subjective, and you're very rules driven, you're very good at that. Things can just be subjective. You think, well, this is okay. But if we're going to do the rules, we ought to say what you can hold for.
Well, that's another one of
I
those.
think
that
that's
right?
a legal
Well,
thing.
Kathy, go ahead.
Kathy, go ahead.
Well, just my opinion, 95% of the time, the reason I poll you is because somebody needs something on an agenda, an emergency, or they need an action that you're gonna say yes to anyway, but there's no meeting coming. So they're gonna miss their opportunity if I don't poll you.
Right. I think that's the thing.
Lots of that is the airport staff are saying, we gotta have this thing to FAA tomorrow
You're
morning.
gonna miss $1 million or,
Or if it's fireworks or something like that. I
Yeah.
think Brownie makes a point, if it's administrative, I don't think there's anything wrong with holding the board. But I would have to say I disagree. If you're gonna go out and say ping, 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 if you're getting 7, one at a time or all the time, you're getting direction from the board, and that's a vote, and that goes to Joe's point. So if it's administrative, you can always do it and then go into session and do a retroactive on
Right.
something that's of not great significance. And I would say the hours aren't of great significance, that's an administrative thing. But if it's a zoning ordinance or something like that, anything resolution driven or ordinance driven, you gotta do it in a public session.
yeah.
And if it's important, you can always have a special meeting within 48 hours.
And I think one of the things that complicated this, and it's a resolution we probably need to fix, is there is a resolution setting his hours. And we probably need to work on that resolution as so that we take away those.
I think that's a good idea too. But even if, there potentially could be other landlines out there that I just don't want to step in,
I hear
so I think it's a both and.
Yeah. I hear you saying if it's administrative.
I was part of the same issue you were in. I commented on.
And maybe that's the thing. administrative. Because if you start trying to say exactly what it is, it's one of those little no big yes things that,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not gonna fall into one of those categories. So,
I mean, is this as simple as saying, just to run it by our attorney before, if you don't have clarity in your head, just to run it by our attorney to see if it meets
oh,
the
yeah.
thing, yeah.
Oh,
so-
yeah, and if it's not me, whoever's in this phone is gonna have to run it by the attorney, because I just know, but
Right.
it's not something you just know.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so the rule would be in matters that are, within the guidelines of North Carolina statutes or whatever our rules are, that this is the process for polling the board.
And I tell you, it's real easy to go, Paul, okay, for Paul, okay. I mean, it's.
We
it's
do
easy.
know, bad.
I was not your friend.
No, it's not, but initially, I mean, I had to learn that right out of the gate because, I mean, when I was with Clayton, I was a reply all offender. And they used to wear me out there, so we cannot do that.
We say it's important to walk down the hall.
Awesome.
So here, we'll add that, bring it back to you, and then we'll get a new statement we'll route that for you. You all to take a look at, give us feedback on.
So you're just going to add a description of polling, definition of polling in this somewhere. So I think
And
it'd be
more
really
important-
helpful.
Yeah, and who does it, I
And
think
do-
that was.
That's right, who
Yeah.
can do that.
We covered a lot of the code of ethics, which is next, as we were going through that discussion. So I didn't know if there were things in there. And I think we covered a lot of that both yesterday and today. Are we good with it?
I'm good.
I'll just tell you, the only part it really does require, address at least all the following. The need to obey all applicable laws regarding official actions, we're all good at that. The need to uphold the integrity and independence of the board member's office. The need to avoid impropriety in the exercise of the board member's official duties. So it does need to address the point that Browning makes, but I don't think it needs to state so in the rules. But the code of ethics needs to have that point, and I know it does. And the need to conduct the affairs of the governing board in an open and public manner, including applying to all applicable laws governing open meetings and public records.
So that ours covers all of that now.
It does, but I guess we just have to sit and talk about how we address Holly's question for polling.
Oh, here.
Well, I mean, that just goes to the point. I mean, all things have to be done in an open manner. Well,
Does that not come under this paragraph? Well, not this, but
it does.
county commissioner shall avoid impropriety of the appearance, there's that word appearance again, we're concerned about. Appearance of impropriety in all his or her activities.
B3, it needs to address the need to avoid impropriety in the exercise of the board member's official duties. So right there does not say the appearance. And when we were drafting that, it might have just come out of my head like David said, I mean, this is beaten into us in the code of ethics for legal profession. But, if you want to change that, I don't think there's a need to change that in our code of ethics, because it's probably a good thing to do, but we can take it out of the statement that David reads. Or where was that written? It was in the rules, right?
Well, but we're going to change the statement so that we're not reading the rule, we're reading, sharing the definition.
Actually, after I said that, Mike, I think it is in the rules of the appearance, the word appearance.
It is, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
But David reads it to you.
I
So we
think
can say that, the statement David reads, we can easily change, and we don't need to vote on that.
Yes,
change.
3F, no, 4F, appearances of conflict.
Yeah, I think too, when you change that to Mike's point, which I think maybe where he's going, you can kind of also you can get the same point across to the public, but maybe soften it up so that it sounds like, it's being read out of the, you know what I'm saying, like, I just don't do this, not that that says it now, but it's, a lot of times if it's read in legal language, it seems
It's harsh.
kind of direct.
Okay, one more thing before we take a quick break, because this is something y'all need to make some decisions about. This may be the fourth tab. This is the list of, one day. At your organizational meeting, a few things have to happen, they'll be on the agenda. One is your vice chair, the other is there are certain boards and commissions that a commissioner is required to serve on. And this is the list of those boards and commissions. And you will need to appoint them at your organizational meeting, or on your agenda, not the organizational meeting. Which is, I don't know.
It's the same, it's the same thing,
Okay.
because they've combined these two.
Okay. So, as you look through these, I mean, you may want to have just some discussions about who's going to serve on what, but just so you have the time to think through, this will be on your agenda on December 1st.
Well, I would say the ones who are serving, if they want to continue to serve, it's fine. If Miranda has a specific area, I think we need to, I'd like to get your input, all of us like to get your input about things you're interested in. And we've got the open boards, I think we just need to be talking amongst ourselves about who wants to be on there. And I wouldn't be shy if you're going to be on one, talk it up.
And I would just say, Landis guide, I can't go because of, the times of the meeting conflict with work, but it's very important to be on if you want to meet regional people, and it's fascinating the things they do.
Does anybody not want to be on the boards that they're on right now? Or on the alternative, someone really want to be on one of those boards that someone's on for whatever reason?
I want to keep doing what I'm doing. I'm only in one now, and I want to stay on that. The only one that I have an interest in or openness to, but if someone else has a strong desire, then I'm totally open to that too, would be the Riverfront Development Board. I work down in the River Arts District, so I'd be willing to do that. But if somebody else just has a strong interest in it too, that's fine as well.
I'd like to be on EDC.
Miranda, have you?
HHS.
So it's for Miranda's information, you have to do too, right?
I don't
No?
think
I
we
don't have to. I've only done one. I've only done one in the last 2 years.
Over.
I mean, I think normally that's how it plays out, but,
Who's been on the juvenile?
I'm currently on it.
There's 10 boards, and probably when there was 5 commissioners, that was a
That's probably what
little.
Actually, the commissioner asked me on the workforce development too.
I think that has to be the chairman because you're the executive for the chairman
No
of the
choice.
city.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think the region nominated me to be one too for something, and so I got it 2 ways.
That was actually in law. I can help it.
That's a good try, BG.
I think they abolished that one, reformed it to something else anyway, so that's the 3rd or 4th state board I've been abolished. So, go down with the ship.
Sorry about that.
No, that's good, I've been going, so that's good.
So Holly, are you on the juvenile crime, is that what I just heard?
You want to continue being on it?
I can. I stepped up when there was a vacancy.
Yeah. What's the?
It's a pretty, I mean, it's super, the people are great, and they're super it's an interesting topic. It's about how, I mean, one of the fundamental things that we do is that there's a pretty substantial pot of money that comes into our community that is allocated, and they kind of oversee those there's subcommittees that do the majority of the work. I mean, they spend 2 days listening to the applications. But anyway, there are ways that our community is responding to young people that are having challenges with all a range of criminal issues.
How big is the board? How many members?
15, yeah.
They're pretty much all over the county, or is it, would you consider it more related to the city? or
Oh,
is it more
no, I mean,
everywhere?
we got challenged youth all
Well, I know we do,
over.
and as far as the board and the people that are on it.
I have no idea where people are coming from, but I mean, I would say that it is a board that I think it's important, to understand that children are coming from a lot of different backgrounds. So, again, I'm happy to stay on it, but I also think it's a great, great board that somebody has interest in that issue. I can make it work. It's a little challenging for me when the time is, but it's about making it work, so.
Is it many meetings a year?
No, I think it's kind of unclear. I think it's turning out to be every other month, more than monthly, I think, but I haven't really got my jam on that.
Even labor intensive when they're making decisions around allocation, so it's more
Yeah.
intense in a period of time.
And if you get into certain committees, it's even more intense. And I haven't raised my hand for a committee, because that allocation stuff is
Which I wouldn't think the commissioners want to do. so I mean, I have
no,
to-
exactly. So, yeah, definitely, but there are ways of, so.
Most of these meet monthly, probably audit committee, and that one would be an exception to the monthly meeting.
Just for the record, in the future, if on the TAC, if one of you guys should decide that you're not interested in dealing anymore, I like that sort of stuff. And so I'll probably come to the meetings, I just like being plugged into that. So if at some point it's be a burden or something, one of you want somebody to step in there, and I have an interest in that.
And I think Joe makes a good point, that I don't, in the sense that we can go to whatever meetings we want to go to. I mean, it's probably just good, it's a good, idea to let the people on the board know that you're coming if you can, or particularly if you're going to speak at it, and not see that coming by the side. That's just a good, it's not required, but it's just a really good idea.
No surprises.
The no surprises thing. So, like, for example, I really wanted to go hear the Ebola thing at the HHS, but I just couldn't.
It was good.
I couldn't make it work, but that would be me just showing up to learn as opposed to,
Well,
This
I
is just
go-
my, you go to most of those, that's an internal, I mean, that's one of your largest funding responsibilities. I always copy all of you on and give them any of your welcome if it's relevant.
Well,
Yeah, you've come some.
just so y'all will know, these are not on boards you can be appointed to. I mean, we can appoint commissioners to any board. And we have how many boards total?
49.
49, so, I mean, I know I've been on some boards that traditionally commissioners weren't on. And I know when I was, the first time I was on MSD, it was very controversial to have an elected official on MSD.
And now it's primarily.
It's normal, yeah. So things come and go, but, are there any other?
Just for the record, the Smart Start Board has changed their bylaws in a way that's fantastic, and that's really smart and very efficient, and does not technically require a county committee. I'm gonna still, they asked me to be on, I'm not sure. But they've got, the categories now are kind of government, so it might be a commissioner going forward, but it's a little bit more targeted to the needs of the board, as opposed to, you've got to check this box, check. I know, it's so good. It's gone from being like a gazillion people to being, maybe 18 or something. So anyway, so that one can go away in the future, but I'm still on it now.
Gosh, we got a bunch of staff on that.
The rules let us change that, so we really only have Philip Harden and Camille Ritter.
Two of the boards has been really helpful to me, just for Brandon's information. But, of course, she's going to be on HHS, so if I go to HHS board meetings, when I can, because
would also, like Miranda's getting all this advice.
Oh, shit.
It's my suggestion. But I think that, and Ella mentioned it, so like, the Land of Skies is just, I did that one the first time I was on the county, and I just learned so much. There were a lot of people. There were, like the different aldermans on, Woodfin and Black Mountain. There are all the folks from different entities come together, not just in Buncombe County,
Right.
but beyond. And anyway, it's a sweet group. Sometimes they feed you.
They always feed you.
It's really good. So anyway,
Well, that sells.
yeah, really, game over. I trump. But just in terms of kind of understanding, like, and building relationships and kind of that was really helpful for me when I was first.
And it's a lot of economic development, like, the whole thing with tobacco to beer, whatever, the hops things.
Yeah, it's
No, it's very interesting.
So let's take a 10-minute break. These are things obviously you'll need to vote on December 1st, but I'm going to take some people. Then we got just one more. We should do more 45 minutes.
Really?
45 minutes?
Good.
I got a field trip I'm going on. When's the next year?
So I'll send you the agenda. So fourth Friday at lunch, 11:30 to 1. And it came back, oh, no.
Mine's always compromised.
By somebody else.
That's somebody else. It's actually,
I cannot imagine. Do you remember when we made that change? That was a big deal.
All righty. Well, if we're ready to start back, okay, if everybody's ready to start back, what I have next that I'd like to share with you is a proposal for workshops in the agenda for this year. And if I have my druthers, I'd say I'd like for us to have a learning and outreach year. A couple of ideas that came up yesterday. So I'm going to just pass these out. And this is, these are not first meetings of the month except in July. But there are going to get us ready for the budget and then to just outreach like we talked about yesterday. And we already have the January, and these are for the third Tuesdays for the most part. The January meeting, you've already got it on your calendar for a full day for capital planning retreat. Capital requests all came in last week. We're assembling that information and we'll do a reality check on all of it. But what we'll include in that is our major request as we go through it. And we also we're reaching out to the schools to see if they have major requests that relate to capital because we have to do funding streams for them. And then we're waiting to see what comes in from the nonprofits on capital requests too. Those are not due until the 3rd of December, I believe. So what I'm proposing is in January, of course, is the capital planning retreat. In February, that we hear from the nonprofits like we did 2 years ago, so that one is you know who they are, what they want to do, and we have some further information we're going to provide to help you do some background and where we stand with those. In March, we really do need to do an update on our strategic plan. And you have the copy of that we had this morning. And then we also need to do a budget retreat. So all of our departmental budgets will be in by then and we'll know what we're facing. In April, because we do have new people and frankly, I mean, our 2 years haven't run completely on the ones who are elected. Last time, we wanted to give you an overview of our land use ordinances, how they apply, where they apply, how they relate to one another, so that as you consider the changes that you want to make, we're all on the same page, and we know what applies where. So John will have that together for us. In May, we will hear from the city schools, county schools, AV Tech, and then the budget message for the county. And in June, we have budget adoptions. May and June will be incredibly busy months. From the time we do budget message until you adopt a budget will be an intense period of time. One of the things you said you'd like to do yesterday was really have meetings with some of our other boards. And July tends to be a fairly slow month for us, and I thought it'd be nice if we just did an invitation to the city schools, county schools, and AB Tech to have a larger meeting, and then from there figure out if you wanted to have a more targeted meeting. And then do the municipalities the third Tuesday in July, kind of the same approach. There is not a time that will get everybody on every board. So that's the proposal there. Another group that we actually, that should not say towards the end of fire chiefs. I did some cutting and pasting at 6:30 this morning. That was not good. Another group that we fund a lot is all of the 21 fire districts. And I think it would be good just to have the chiefs and assistant chiefs meet with you so that they can share with you what their plans are when it comes to maybe the equipment they need to buy, the substations they're doing, what's happening to their insurance ratings, and you know, periodically, we've had discussions with the fire chiefs about do we want one county-wide fire district. There's some pros and cons to that, and it'd be nice to have that discussion so that we, as you continue to fund those, you just have a little more information. One of the other things that we talked about doing was listening tours. I do think September, October, November offers the opportunity to get out in each district and do that. It's a busy year if we go through with this, but we often talk about wanting these things and we never actually get them all on the calendar to go do them. So I'm just recommending that we consider this as our schedule for the year. And then we don't usually leave that third Tuesday in December. So this is the recommendation, and I'm real open to feedback on it.
I think it's really good. I would only make one additional suggestion, is I do feel like that, you know, if you just look visually at our community and you kind of see City Hall and county commissioner, I would make the case that, you know, the joint meeting with Asheville City Council, and it kind of warrants its own thing. It's, you know, particularly in terms of the monies that the things that we are really deep in together. I mean, it could be just about all the things that we work together on, because it's just not the same in scale or in magnitude. And that's not to say that other places are not important. It's just not equal in terms of the amount of work we're doing and what we need to understand in terms of you know, the economic development engine and whatnot. I think we kind of clump it all together. I mean, maybe we can have one with municipalities that there are, you know, those issues, but I think probably makes it, in addition, we would have one with just Asheville City Council. So it's just an idea. Or maybe the way we do it is we find a topic that we, you know, maybe it's economic development is the topic, and we do that one together. So that might be the better way to think about it. But
although it's nice to have, it's nice sometimes to have meetings where you don't have an agenda. You can just kind of come in and you just kind of see what's on people's minds, and not have to be too structured. Maybe you have some topics, but also just some time for some open discussion, and make sure you have the space for that.
You want me to look for a fifth Tuesday, a month that has a fifth Tuesday, because that would, given their schedule. I'll look for one.
And then, is there any way to move the fire chief up meeting sooner than August? Just because they seem like they have some pressing issues.
I'm open to moving it. It'd be hard to get them before June.
Okay.
Unless you wanted to delay. About the only topic out here that we could delay would be the land use ordinance update. If you wanted to move it there.
No, I know, that's fine.
The finance numbers for the fire districts look fine right now, don't
They do. It's just we never, there's several of us that actually got meet with the chiefs, but we've never done that with the commission. And I mean, if you look collectively, that's a pretty significant.
They have some real issues about volunteers. They need something creatively done to get more volunteers.
Yeah, the training for them now is so. for a fifth Tuesday to add council, and we could, if y'all are okay with this, then we send out the invitations further in advance, we can send them out, and we'll, whatever attendance we get. Okay.
So just in general, these, you would schedule these for the meeting on the third Tuesday of the month, not the first Tuesday.
The third Tuesday. And then, but January and March, I will tell you, will be all day. The others we can catch at the regular meeting time. But the March one, I think with the updated strategic plan and the budget, will have to be a longer meeting.
Now, with February, the non-for-profit, so would there be anything other business to do or just them?
Only if we had something that really had to be
Okay.
done, we'll try to keep that a real light agenda, because that could be a,
I thought that was really helpful.
I got a lot of feedback that was helpful overall.
The only thing, I mean, this is very ambitious for us, and I think it's great. And Mandy and I kind of had this sidebar conversation about, are there possibilities for some of the pressing issues that we might need to have a work session on, just kind of around the topic? And I don't know if that's something that I would be interested in, kind of where you learn deeper about an issue, particularly in anticipation of making some bigger decisions. I don't know, Mandy, if you'd be willing to say more about that, or?
And I think it's kind of the same thing John's after with the land use planning. On my side, sometimes it's hard to balance how far do I go working on things like a justice center that's out there a lot, or dealing with a current issue around homelessness for women and children, without some board direction. How far do you go in a planning and evaluation of different models without some direction? Does it fit with your strategic vision for some of those issues?
And, and I would be willing to, obviously not a lot, but if we could either do it on the second Tuesday or fourth Tuesday, or there's another one that's fifth Tuesdays. I think that would be terrific.
Let me go back and see a couple of things, fifth Tuesdays, and then if we take a whole day for the strategic plan, we might be able to do some of those on that day too. Because some of these things are coming pretty fast.
That's the crisis center, it's not the 356. Clearly, I don't want y'all reading about anything anywhere else, right? It's about, I live in that fear all the time, so it's.
And I would also say on the land use, since we have other boards will have to weigh in, the planning board have to weigh in. We've got a lot of appointments on the planning board, and that one might have to be moved up some too, but I think it's good to save space. That's the latest we'll do it, but since we do have to go through other boards, I think that one, we may have to get another time. We'll just.
I'll see what kind of fifth Tuesdays we have. We have enough business to, I think it's hard to take your first Tuesday and your third Tuesday. And we can be strategic about that as the year goes on, but we'll always have some things that just rezonings, things that take some regular board meeting time. But let us look at some options on those, and look at fifth Tuesdays to give us some.
March, June.
I think I'll take the third Tuesday on every month. It's too late in the year, realistically, with the listening tours, there's a lot of business that needs to take place before then. We can actually have a board meeting and a listening tour at the same time, but out at another location. We might have to tighten up the first part of the year. There's just a lot going on. We're not in a position, I'll tell you, we've done interim budgets, they are excruciating. I mean, they're horrible for staff to have to go through. Because it's driven very much by, you gotta have the budget in place, there's things we have to pay right up front of the year. It's very, very difficult to do an interim budget. I want to avoid that for many years to come.
And we don't, and we're in no jeopardy because the General Assembly can't do anything weird right now, right?
I think they've done all the way that.
Yeah.
And I think they've done, I don't anticipate, anything other than what the departments might do to us more so than the General Assembly.
So what would be an example?
What they do in NC Fast,
Okay, got it, okay,
with
okay.
Human Services primarily, and they're apt to do some things inside the departments that will make a difference.
And we think they'll probably do it in a way that would not impair our timeline, I would think, or, because they're,
There's several study commissions that impact organizational structure, reaching from privatization of things like eligibility functions to one I think has real legs in there, which is regionalization. And in my opinion, there is no option other than Buncombe in the West that they'll look to. When you talk about complexity, when you have 50% county money in the administration of those programs, trying to negotiate that with the 23 western counties. So I do worry about that one. I worry about it both on the child welfare side, but mostly on the economic service side. We can see fast shows you some counties can do it, and some counties can't. And that's what we're glad.
And, you know, I think Mandy does a great job, and I think we'll meet our, mostly because she's on it and watching it every minute. But we may well be the only one in the state that makes their deadlines by the end of December.
Understand that means people who are Medicaid eligible will cease to be eligible December 31st. Which place to your hospitals and providers can't bail on them,
Yeah.
can't be paid.
And that's why she's all over it to make sure we meet that deadline.
So you just look at us, from conversion to December 31st, we had 19,000 that were due in those 3 months. And it's 2.5 hours to convert from the old system to the new system, and now we're to restart it, so.
Those are the kind of things that happen to us that we just, you don't get forewarning sometimes, you've got to put the resources on it, and so those worry me more than what the General Assembly would do the next time.
But we're down to under 6 this morning. We'll get there. We're doing 450 a day, so we'll get there. But we're open. We have staff working at Cox from 5 in the morning till 9 at night, which is when the system's up. There's wear and tear.
To prepare us for the February meeting, there's not much we can do right now to prepare you for the January meeting because we're just now sorting our way through a lot of the capital, and we will be ready with all the alternatives that we've looked at, and those always come in as very high wish lists, so we've got some work to do. But to prepare you for your February meeting, when you hear from the nonprofits, I do have some things in your notebook that I think will be helpful just as you get ready. The first thing is, if you look at the tab, it's just your resolution on how you'll fund nonprofits. That was amended last year on administrative costs, so that's just there. And all of these are just here for your reading pleasure. The next page tells you about fiscal year 15, what came in, what you approved, and how much. And we had the complication as we were approving for the 15 budget of still having a CRA and the general fund. So when you look at your dashboard that you get every Wednesday, the reason CRA is high is because the timing on that, we had to move all that money over. So this is just your current year. One of the things we added on the next page is the administrative percentage on each of those. So that's part of the resolution. And then the next page will give you a little bit of history of what we've done from 2011 forward. We do have, the next page is the one that looks like this. It's new for us in terms of making it a lot more, a lot clearer. We had our internal auditor go through and make some recommendations with our foundation staff and our budget staff to say what kind of financial statements needed to be presented based on the operating budget, the levels of that on our nonprofits, to make sure we get the information and we can defend that we know what's going on with the organizations. This is just a schedule that shows you who needs to present what kind of financial statements and whether or not they have been presented. It also, we are working with them, and we have made it very clear as your application comes in, these documents need to come in with your application. So you've got good accountability in the process. When we appropriate these monies, and totally these are your decisions to make, we do bring that information in-house and we manage that through the foundation. And they do a really good job. So Maggie's going to go over our process that we use from the time the request is initiated on through monitoring the process.
If you can find this in your data, I'm not doing a PowerPoint, I'm not talking more than 10 minutes. I don't want to get the first gone. That looks like this. This is kind of the process wheel piece, and just to talk about that clearly to begin with, you set the priorities. You decide that. I think back to last March when we went over the strategic plan or the sustainability plan, you told us to focus on programs that support job and job growth and employment, violence toward women and children, and preserving the environment where those focuses. So you drive that, then agencies apply, and we bought software in the last year that is the same software used by all the funders in the community. So we can share information and try to align or leverage resources. And it also takes the burden off nonprofits because they're basically able to use the same format for every funder, which saves them time. Those agencies make oral presentations to you, as Wanda just said. We'll tell you, we just had the external audit for the foundation, and they made a really good point. They said one of the reasons we're lower risk than other nonprofits is that you have at your fingertips subject matter expertise that doesn't exist anywhere else. If you want to invest in something regarding preserving land, you have planning staff. You want to look at access to health care, you have healthcare experts. You have that subject matter expertise. We assign those to the departments to evaluate using that subject matter expertise, and we give you recommendations. They don't come, that's the wrong word. We tell you what we think strengths are and potential challenges are to help you in your deliberations. But we totally get those are your decisions to make, and at the point you make those, it's our job to manage them in a performance-based contract. I put on there considerations because sometimes y'all get approached either as individuals or groups. And I just want to be clear what staff looks at when we're evaluating them. We look at, do they align with this sustainability plan? Do they support core services? That might not be the only reason you fund them, but we at least want you to know that. And I want to say what the direction has always been the staff in my tenure is core services are things mandated, but you also set priorities. An example in my shop is school nurses. School nurses aren't mandated by law, but you all have always said to us, we support that model, we want to invest in that model, it improves health outcomes, there's lots of research that says that. We look at, is it connected to other department budgets? And is there an opportunity to leverage dollars in a better way because of that? So we evaluate that. What's the strength of the application? One of the things your subject matter experts are going to know is how strong is that entity that's applying. Are there other things going on with that entity that might be impacting their sustainability? We look at, is it evidence-based, and can we tie it to outcomes in the long range? Is it client-centered? We added language to all our contracts that talk about our customer service expectations. I'll tell you one in my shop that's a continued challenge with is child support. We make that part of what we measure and make them do a survey every year. We also tie things to it that support core, like we look at all of our contracts that could do immunization outreach, and we make that a piece of their contract, or flu messaging. The financial insurances, Wanda talked about, are part of that, and the amount of funds requested and available. And we say this, I said it last year and I'll say it again this year. You have one time a year that funds are available. If you fund something outside of that, and believe me, I understand that's totally at your discretion, either comes because the department finds the money and has to make a cut somewhere else, or you fund it out of fund balance. One of the things that we just suggest every year is, would you want to do a set aside for urgent or emerging issues? If you pass your budget and something changes significantly, child care would be an example of that this year, in the state budget, would you want to have some set aside for that? That is totally your decision. I'm just putting it on the table. Once you adopt your budget, we move into those performance-based contracts and we administer those. Wanda made a good point, like financial compliance. We view a piece of our job is helping nonprofits comply. It's not about you don't meet this, here's the hammer. It's about, let's define what does administrative percentage actually mean, because we find nonprofits are all over the board in how they define that. I'll give you an example for that, is Medical Society, who tended to view navigation with those patients as administration. In our world, that's pure case management, that's direct contact. If you put that in your administrative overhead, it's going to look very high, and for us, that's not an accurate representation of the work you're doing. And then we give you both a quarterly, and we'll get to that in just a second, and an annual report on how those nonprofits are doing. We offer you a midterm briefing, usually at lunch, if you can come, and we go over it with you, but you get it either way. What's second in your packet, just for you to consider, is we actually took your investment in those funds, be it through the nonprofit or be it through Health and Human Services, and tied it to your sustainability goals. So you actually see a graph that shows you how, in each of those areas, how much are you investing in percentage, either because of your nonprofit grants or because we do a performance-based contract through Health and Human Services. And for us, that's about leveraging dollars and resources and having a greater impact. And that's always available to you. The last thing in your packet, it looks like this. It's basically their performance. We do it every quarter and send it to you, and then you will also get an annual. What's in here is the closeout of fiscal year 2014 and your first quarter of 15. Tells you which sustainability goal it ties to, what their main objective is and what their performance is, and it gives you a little indicator. Did they meet it? Are they moving in the right direction? Do we have a caution? If you see a caution, Rachel Nygaard, who is our staff planner evaluator assigned to this, is meeting with that nonprofit, trying to redefine the goal, understand what the challenges are, and helping them succeed. It is our goal that they succeed, so we're very focused on that. And that's a really quick overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And also, as always, if that's not the data you want or in the format you want, just tell us. We can produce it any way that makes the most sense for you.
And we're thinking this will be helpful to you as you hear from the nonprofits in February, just to know how things are going. Lots of reading. I know this will be back here on your nightstand just to pick up every night and peruse.
I have a question.
Sure.
The grants, the performance analysis review,
Yes.
it looks like two different types of, is there just one for Health and Human Services alone? Is that the different?
These are all of yours, the ones that you fund.
So is this just a different, did you just revise?
We
the
revise it
format?
in part, I think you and I think Commissioner Belcher came to that midterm report, and we made, and I think Commissioner Jones did, we made a few tweaks to the tool based on what you told us
Okay.
last year, but we couldn't change it mid-year because it wasn't fair to the
That's good,
nonprofit.
that's good. It's just a different visual.
Different visual, it
Okay, it
is.
looked like the same, I just didn't know why it looked different.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, that's great, that's great, because we always want to tweak it. It's fine.
I think this is really great, and, wow, I mean, you can learn so much so quickly and how y'all really condense the data, and I'm very, we got 3 quarters to go for sure, but, just a quick glance is like, it's looking like we made some good investments, because all the arrows are green in the right direction, or the green is what is happening and not the other, and unless something's not started yet, so that's, I don't want to jinx anybody, but that's fantastic. The other thing I was gonna say too is just kind of, having, ear to the ground, is that, a lot of the, organizations that we are contracting with is provide these critical services are, they really like working with Rachel, and I think they feel that, they are improving. It's been a kind of a partnership, and they're getting stronger too, and that's just good for the whole community, right? Whether we fund that program or they get stronger as an entity, and their other programs are gonna be stronger too. So I'm hearing a lot of good feedback about that relationship, and that's kind of unique too, kind of when you're in a funder position, and so it feels like we're enhancing the community, you know, some fabric in our community as well as delivering these services, so.
I should say, for those of you who are a real number of people, if that Health and Human Service investment contract's 11.5 million a year looks low, that is not all our contracts. Those are just the contracts we have that align with the money you spend. We contract about $26 million in core services out here and health and human services.
And I want to commend you, I think we mentioned this at the meeting that we were at, to have each page has the symbols on it so you don't have to refer back. I think anytime you can have a self-contained unit of all the information someone needs to analyze it and understand it is always smart, and I think that was done. You've been doing that all along, I guess, but that's great.
So, back to the contingency. So I'm just going to the director of the YW, because it brings to the after-school care. You know, I think it's 19 mothers that are either gonna have to go to part-time work or not be able to, you know, and these are all working mothers. So is that part of the contingency plan? Is there a way?
We didn't do a contingency for 2015. What Mandy was talking about is when we have to fund in the course of the year, we either have to cut something in the department or go to fund balance. So if you want a contingency in the 16 budget, it's time to be thinking about that.
I think that's one of those that, and that's a great example, where I think you have to delineate between how can you fairly and equitably address that issue, because, you know, of the number of licensed child care providers who are impacted besides one.
Right.
2,500 families statewide impacted by that. And the biggest issue is one of the things in the budget, the state budget, and I was telling Commissioner Jones, one of the things we really have to watch is it used to be the state budget gave you pretty clear indication of impact. Now a lot of that has been pushed down to rules. So the General Assembly says in child care, we want a whole flat or we want to cut, whatever, I think it's probably about 7 million. The Rules Committee defines the what, and what they did is said, there's no prorating of parent fees. So if Mike puts his child in after school, just 2 hours a day, and I have an infant in full time, we're both going to pay the full load on those co-pays.
Yeah.
That's the impact that I've seen in after school and other after school programs have seen. You know, but that one,
That's gonna be a killer.
it's gonna be a killer. If you want to address that, understand, the state's not gonna generate the dollars.
Right.
We would generate the dollars, but even beyond that, I'd say, I'd have to build an entirely separate eligibility system, because parents have a choice. That's one. I'm so glad you brought up that conflict, because really, if you ask me, that was a reflection on me. I'm responsible for administering those federal dollars, and the rules are set on our federal level. And parents have the ultimate decision about who gets child care subsidy support is the parents. You can't restrict who the parent chooses. So you couldn't say, I'm just going to fund this one.
Right.
You have to say, Mike can pick any licensed 4 or 5 star provider, and we would have to build an entirely separate payment system than currently exists. I think that's one, and we're scheduling a briefing with the local delegation now before January, but that's one that's got to get looked at on the state level. Between that and the intention, but the 30-hour work where you have to purchase insurance, we are literally seeing parents have to leave jobs. But that's an example, I do believe, of a contingency.
It's been turbo information, and I understand that, and we'll make some adjustments that we've talked about and get you a new schedule back. That's all we have as staff to bring today, and hopefully it starts to prep us for this run we're gonna take starting in January. The rest of us are starting that run this afternoon.
Funny.
Well, does anybody, if that's the case, anybody have anything else to add to our retreat momentum here?
Only thing I have to put into it is we need to have a 48-hour, when we're going to the chambers on subjects like what we did for the school here a while back, and, you know, we understand the staff. It needs to be brought forward before the day of the meeting and added to the agenda, like the $500,000 was added, and Spring and the staff had to change their program to add that money that day of the meeting. So we need to, whatever's on the agenda, I think we need to kind of flow with that or take it off and regroup and come back with it later instead of.
Well, I mean, I think that that's always a good operating rule, but I feel like we need to be able to respond to, because I think if we are made all those kind of decisions ahead of time, that's not being public. And so we can't, I think you're right, and that's just good information to do, but I'm not willing to say, we made this deal back here, that's all I'm gonna look at. If, I hear somebody say a good idea or someone brings up something at the time, that's part of what we do in public, and,
Well,
so.
the topics need to be identified for what's on the agenda, right? But like, as to Holly's point, you don't know exactly where the discussion and decisions might go at that meeting, so like, because that was a budget meeting, right? I mean, people knew we're here to talk about the budget, and
They
and
made
so.
a request beforehand, and, it was considered in an open meeting, and.
Where the budget was on the agenda.
The budget
Right,
was
so
on the agenda,
I think we gotta tell people what we're gonna talk about, but you can't always know exactly what's gonna happen,
yeah. But I think
in the
your
meeting.
point is that you don't want to be surprised, and you felt surprised.
All of us,
Mhm.
even the people, because there was a number set, including Mr. Ball, and it wasn't the extra 500,000 right at that point, so it was a surprise to them that this showed up, and it's a surprise to Ms. Green at 10 o'clock in the morning that she had to change all of her PowerPoints to add this to the fund balance. So I think we need to give our staff a little more time to absorb what they're going to do, and the other, not just county, the other commissioners understand what we're doing.
Again, I think that's a good way to be. I think it's a good thing. I'm not willing to say that we can't, that because something X, Y, Z didn't happen, that I would say we don't do something. Because I don't feel like I'd be being responsible. If I felt like this was a good idea that was just presented, and that maybe we can make a change. I mean, you might make an amendment that would make a really good idea, and could be open to it, but.
But I would actually put it out to all 7 members.
But my
And
point
enough time
is,
to make it work.
everybody thinks differently, and I think you and I are alike, that we think a lot ahead of time beforehand, but some people think on their feet. And so I want to be open to people that think on their feet too, and always want to default to giving staff time to, type all the information. I really don't want to surprise you, that's not the agenda. All I'm saying is that I'm going to be open to that information coming from the public, or coming from other board members, or even coming from staff. And I'm not going to be tied to, if we didn't talk about it 48 hours ahead, we're not going to do it.
Well-
I just don't think that's,
I
I don't
started
think we're
to
ready to
remember,
do.
I started to remember this, but walk me through what happened.
basically, the schools made a presentation in our budget and said that they needed X amount more dollars than we had initially kind of put in our budget. And they made the case for it. And then over the course of the next 2 weeks, folks talked to each other, and there were, I called and said, I talked to some people that wanted to do, I didn't make the whole round robin. I knew y'all were gonna vote against the budget. You made it very clear. So I just ran out of time, frankly. I'll be happy to include you in the future, but it was kind of an issue of time at that point. So It was that addition, it was the money that they had asked for. They had requested in their formal proposal, in public, on a piece of paper, said, this is what we need. And we like, yeah, then make this a reasonable case. So that was what we, so I don't see any secret about that at all, because I think that was, now that Tony was pleasantly surprised, but I don't think the fact that that's a problem, because they asked for the money, and we just gave it.
Well, it goes back to anything, Holly. Anybody, including where you work or anyone else, is always going to ask for more and hope they get what they want. How's it right? You got
Well,
sponsors for money,
Absolutely.
and you know, you hit them with a bigger number, and then if you get close to what you want, then it's okay. That's.
Well, I mean, the truth
that's
of the
way
matter is.
Everybody's budget is.
Yeah, and they made the case to me, and clearly for other people, that they needed that higher number, you know, and frankly, I think, you know, we need to give more money for textbooks, so, but that's neither here nor there, so your point is a good point, but I would not be willing to say this is a hard and fast rule for me, Holly Jones, to do her job in the way that I think I can best do my job.
Well, the only thing you know, that bothers me is I have a call one night, everything's done on actually the carbon footprint thing, so I said, okay, we're good, we're all good. And that got changed the day of the meeting, again, changed back, so, you know, that's where I'm going. If we're going to say something to somebody, talk to them on the telephone, say everything's good. You know, some people's against, some people's for. Okay, I leave what I have at home in the project, so I've left everything I've got at home 20 minutes before the meeting. I found out we changed back to the other rules that we were going to do. You know, there's one thing I'll never do as long as I'm in this committee. That's something that I'll never approach in that form. I'll never do anything the day of, you know, to try to change something. That's just the way I'm going to be. And I think it's tougher on the staff than it is for us. I know what we are and what we're supposed to be. But when you walk in a room at 10 o'clock and tell a lady, well, you got to change this and add $500,000 to it, she's already got all her grass dried, she has to pull all the people down and start all over. That's costing us money, the county people money, just to do something at that time. We could have done it a little later.
You know, and I think a big point here, and I'll say this in hush, is that when you're talking about a part of the budget like education, you know, I may or may not vote for an entire budget, but I mean, I would have, you know, stuck $500,000 in there for teacher assistants. There's all
But
kinds.
you got to do for the budget.
But I can't do that.
Yeah,
But I
so.
can voice my opinion regarding, you know, those parts, those particular parts, and be very, you know, very, very supportive of them. But, you know, I don't, to this particular point, the only reason I said that is, you know, you did mention about, you know, but there are parts of any of these that, you know, we have strong feelings, you know. Whereas education is one of them that I, you know, the more conversation we can have as a board about that, the better off we are. And for real, for sure, this board has proved that we are very supportive of education and the schools and the kids and things like that. So, you know, any more dialogue we can have about that, I think, you know, kind of cool. So.
I mean, I'm beating a dead horse.
I don't understand
I was
though.
gonna,
You were gonna do it to me?
Horses like
What?
No, it's not, but I think the gist of this conversation is that nobody likes to be surprised. Nobody likes last minute stuff. There will be times it'll happen. And it's okay to say, stop, I want to talk more about this. But it may be that if the majority wants to continue, then it may not.
Well, I agree with that.
And you, sometimes you'll be on the majority, sometimes you won't. So you got to remember, if I'm on the majority today, I may not be next week. And so if we do it a lot, it gets to be, this is kind of bad. I think it's real extraordinary. I'd say it used to happen a lot more. Wouldn't you all agree, John and Juan? I'd say there was more surprises years ago than there were lately. But anyway, one surprise is too much because everybody wants to understand and represent the people the best they can and make the right vote. according to your conscience.
But
Kathy, you have something?
I was just gonna say, to avoid any future upcoming surprises, December the 1st is gonna be a little different. You got November 18th, which is next week, that's your next meeting, all done. The next one is December 1st, not the 2nd, the 1st Monday in December. This is the first time we've ever done an organizational meeting after a staggered term board, so it's a little different. You're not gonna meet on the 2nd, just on the 1st. It'll be organizational and your regular meeting in December. 6 o'clock for swearing in. So the three of you need to tell me who you want to swear you in so I can prepare your oath. And tell your swearer to be here at 6 o'clock. And then 6:30 is the meeting. And that will be organizational, kind of blended in with your regular meeting. Regular meeting will be kind of light, but still, it'll be both. And then no Tuesday meeting. And I don't think a second meeting in December, so you won't meet again until January. So just so you know what your calendar looks like.
Can I say one thing about what Mike was saying? I think human nature, like, we're all really busy. So let's just say, for a year, I have asked Brownie about something, and he always says no to me. So I'm, calling people to sound things out. Things are busy. So human nature, do I call him again? No, unless I really have a lot of time, because he's just going to tell me no again. I mean, that's just kind of human nature, isn't it? I mean,
The call that I got was, okay, I agree that we do what we're gonna do in this respect. You said everything had worked out. I just talked to Mr. Camp before that hand on the carbon footprint bill. And then the next day it all changed. Mr. Gant called me and says Brownie's okay with changing some of the wording in the carbon footprint bill. Then you called me in the process of him talking, and I said, okay, that works for me as long as the wording's changed. As long as it's going to make it work, we just don't have to have the wording. And that was the call that I particularly got, and the stuff that I had laid out to bring in on that particular evening. I left it at the house.
But
So within 20 minutes before,
It is a two-way street though, right? Like I was the sponsor of that proposal, and you never talked to me. So it's a two-way street. And if you really have a passion for some interest, you might want to talk to the person who also, has sort of taken the initiative on that.
Well,
So
then
I know we all talked, but
I thought she'd take the
you
middle
seem
road
surprised
out of help.
that you never
And that
gave me a
is-
call on that topic.
So
before the meeting.
that's what I thought. She'd taken the middle road in the picture to make it work, for all of us. And it did work for all of us, so, that's fine. It's just like I said, I just feel like that it don't matter if I want to put something forward, that's like I'll tell you or anybody else. Right? Y'all gonna be the first ones to know what I'm gonna try to do. It's just, I'm not gonna hide it. That's just the way I'm not gonna do it. I'm not gonna put it the day before or in the same day. It's not gonna happen. I may never get anything up, but the fact is, I think we ought to do it. We're all adults, and everybody should know what's happening in the process. I don't care what party it is, we're all adults.
I don't know about the adult part in terms of what that has to do with me, but in the sense that I agree with you, but I do have a fundamental, because I do think as much as conversations we can have and everybody having more is good, but I don't like the feeling that sometimes you can go to, is like, we've all decided before we go out there. And that's what I think we have to really resist. And so I will resist that, because I feel like up until that vote happens, I am open to hearing, people's perspectives. And if I go in there with obviously we all have the things that we're going to believe in and feel for, but I have to be open. I actually think that the law tells you you have to you can't make the deal before ahead of time. You can discuss and say, here's where I'm coming from, here's what's happening, but I am always going to be open to new information and new people's perspectives, and I will not try to surprise people. I will not try to make staff, upset. I will try not to do that. But first and foremost, I'm elected to do the right thing by the people, and I'm in the right thing by law. That's going to trump, you know, sometimes if, you know, it's like, oh gosh, I promised this and now I'm going to change my mind. It's like, no, this is the right thing for the people. I'm really sorry. I'm sorry. But this trumps it.
Well, it's just like the friendly amendment discussion, until it's up for the vote, I mean, everything's fair game.
It's fair game.
I mean, back to the chain-free people. You know, I go in there thinking, you know, how is this gonna work? How could this possibly work? How could it possibly be enforced? But the chain-free people have the sheriff part of their information. And the sheriff says, here's the way I can make it work. And then I change my mind.
Right. So,
Well, that's
we'll
what
try
I
to
thought.
debate.
That's what I thought the night that we had a conversation.
But
I thought that it was, okay, this is gonna make this work, and I changed my mind. But it didn't work that way.
But I think it's kind of evolving as we get more information, right or wrong, whether we agree, whether we don't agree. We make up our minds before we vote. We don't have a preset.
No, I don't think so. I've seen people make promises and they vote the way the promise goes, so, that's, I'm saying it right more.
Well, we've got to do the best we can with what we have, and there's going to be,
All humans.
and when it is, let's talk about it, because,
That's why we're talking in here
and
today.
that's a good thing,
There you
because
go.
the next week we'll be back doing the same thing, and we want to, I will always try to give you a preview as best I can, from talking to all of you, and it may be 100%, it may be 50%, but I'll say this is what I think is going to happen. I do that with staff sometimes. I try to give you a tally of what I see. And y'all can do the same thing. Anybody speculate. I mean, I think I talk to you more, maybe not individually, but, you know, collectively I do, and I try to, because that's part of my job, the way I see it. But it's not, I can't be, I know there will be times you change your mind, or you just get more information and it revises your opinion, but I'll share what I have. What I know, and I think we all do that, and I'll talk about it, and that's the best we can do. Okay, so anything else? It's been a very good conversation. Any other comments? If not, we will go on to the weekend. Y'all have a great weekend, everybody.